Have you ever sat in a room so quiet that your own thoughts felt too loud? Not peaceful quiet, not the kind of quiet you choose, the kind that comes after everything falls apart. The kind that arrives when the phone stops ringing, when the person who used to sleep beside you is gone, when the job that gave your week a shape no longer exists. When you look around and think, how did I end up here? That feeling has a name. It is called zero. And if you are here, listening to this right now, maybe you know that feeling. Maybe you are living it. His name is Daniel. He is 42 years old. He is sitting in a small rented room on a Tuesday afternoon. Outside, people are walking to work, buying coffee, living their ordinary lives. Inside, Daniel is very still. He has been still for 3 days. There is nothing on the walls, one bag on the floor, a phone with no new messages. 15 years of marriage. Gone. The job he built himself up into, gone. The house, the routine, the version of himself he introduced to strangers at dinner parties, gone. He does not feel angry. He does not feel sad. He just feels nothing. Like someone turned the volume all the way down. Maybe you have been there. Not Daniel's exact story, but that exact silence. Here is what I want to tell you today. Zero is not the end. Zero is not a punishment. Zero is not proof that you failed. Zero is the only place where something completely new can begin. Because when everything is stripped away, what remains is the only thing that was ever truly yours. By the end of this lesson, you will not have all the answers, but you will understand something important, something that changes the way you see the ground beneath your feet right now. You are not starting over. You are starting differently. Today we have 6 lessons, 6 honest, simple truths for anyone rebuilding from the bottom. This lesson is for English learners who want more than words. It is for your heart, your courage, your next chapter. Let us begin. Lesson 1. Grief first, move second. The first thing people say when your life falls apart is this: be strong, stay positive, keep moving, do not let it break you. They mean well, they really do. But here is the problem. Your body does not care about what people mean. Your body only knows what happened. And what happened was a loss so large that your whole system needs time to process it. So you sit still. You stare at the ceiling. You sleep too much or not at all. You forget to eat, or you eat everything in sight. You do not answer messages. You cancel plans you made 3 weeks ago when life still felt normal. And then the voice inside your head says, "What is wrong with me?" Nothing. Nothing is wrong with you. That stillness you feel, that heaviness, that numbness that makes even small decisions feel impossible. It is not weakness. It is your mind and body doing exactly what they are supposed to do. They are processing something enormous. They are trying to reorganize a world that suddenly looks completely different. Think of it this way. If you broke your leg, you would not run a race the next morning. You would rest. You would let the bone begin to heal. You would not call yourself weak for not walking. You would understand that healing takes time. Grief is the same. The heart breaks just like the body breaks, and it needs the same respect. Daniel did not leave his room for 3 days. He did not answer his phone. He ordered food once and left it at the door for an hour before he felt ready to open it. His sister called twice. He let it ring. Not because he did not love her, but because he had nothing left to say. He needed those 3 days not to disappear, but to fall apart safely in private, without having to perform okay for anyone. Those 3 days did not destroy him. Those 3 days were the beginning of him. Here is the truth that nobody tells you. Grief is not the opposite of strength. Grief is how strength begins. When you allow yourself to feel the full weight of what you lost, something shifts. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly. A part of you stops fighting the reality of where you are. And the moment you stop fighting reality is the moment you can begin to work with it. There is a difference between running away from pain and walking through it. Running looks like staying busy every second of the day, filling every hour with noise so you never have to sit with what happened. It feels like movement. But you always end up back at the same place because the pain was never processed. It was only postponed. Walking through is different. It is slower. It is uncomfortable. Some mornings it feels like standing in heavy rain with no shelter. But you are moving. Forward, even when it does not feel like it. You are not avoiding the weight. You are carrying it until it becomes lighter. So, if you are in the early days right now, here is your permission. You do not have to be okay. You do not have to have a plan. You do not have to explain yourself to anyone. You are allowed to grieve what you lost. The relationship, the future you imagined, the version of yourself that existed inside that life. All of it deserves to be mourned. Give it that. Give yourself that. Because on the other side of grief is not happiness, not immediately. On the other side of grief is clarity, a quiet, honest knowing of what actually matters. And that clarity, once it arrives, is the first real tool you will use to rebuild. You are not starting over. You are starting differently. But first you have to let yourself feel the weight of what fell. Lesson 2. Strip your identity down to the bone. Here is a question most people never think to ask. Who are you when everything is gone? Not who you were, not who you want to be. Who are you right now, today, with nothing attached to your name? No job title, no relationship status, no address that makes you feel like you belong somewhere. No role that gives other people a simple way to understand you at a dinner party. Just you. Bare. Quiet. Without any of the labels. For most people, that question is terrifying. Because most of us, without knowing it, built our identity on the outside. We became the job. We became the relationship. We became the house, the salary, the reputation, the routine. We answered the question, who are you? With a list of things we had, not things we were. And that works fine. Until it does not. Until the job disappears. Until the relationship ends. Until the life you built around those things is suddenly gone. And then the question returns louder than before. Who are you now? That silence after the question is not emptiness. It is the sound of something important trying to surface. Think about a tree in winter. All the leaves are gone. The branches look bare and dry and almost dead. A stranger walking by might think nothing is alive in there. But underneath the roots are still working. The core is still intact. The tree has not died. It has simply returned to what it actually is, without decoration. You are that tree right now. The roles you lost were real. The life you had was real. The grief for those things is completely valid. But they were leaves. Beautiful, meaningful, important leaves. They were not the root. The root is something else, something harder to name, but impossible to destroy. Daniel stood in front of the bathroom mirror one morning about 2 weeks after moving into this small rented room. He looked at his face for a long time, not checking his appearance, just looking. He noticed something strange. He had spent 15 years being introduced as Sarah's husband. At work, he had been the operations director. At the school gate, he had been Mia's dad, the one who always runs late. Now he was none of those things. Or at least not in the way he used to be. And standing there in that small bathroom with the flickering light, he felt something he did not expect. Not sadness, something quieter. Something that felt very strangely like the beginning of honesty. Because for the first time in years, no one needed anything from him. No one was waiting for the version of him that performed okayness, that showed up polished and capable and in control. He was just a man in a bathroom looking at his own face. And he thought so. This is what is left. Let me find out what this actually is. That moment was not a breakdown. That moment was a beginning. J.K. Rowling once described herself at her lowest point as a failure by every standard she could imagine. She had lost her marriage. She had no steady income. She was a single mother depending on government support. Every external marker of a successful life had fallen away. But something remained. Something that had always been there, even before the marriage, before the career attempts, before the public identity. A voice that told stories. A mind that built worlds from nothing. When everything else was stripped away, that voice was still speaking. She did not find a new identity. She found the one she had always had, underneath all the noise. This is what stripping down to the bone means. It is not about losing yourself. It is about finally seeing yourself. The self that existed before the titles. The self that will exist long after the next chapter begins. So ask yourself the question honestly, not with fear, but with curiosity. If you removed every role, every label, every external thing that tells the world who you are, what would still be there? That answer, however small it feels right now, is where your next life begins. You are not starting over. You are starting differently. And now, for the first time, you are starting as yourself. Lesson 3. The smallest action breaks the freeze. There is a moment that comes after grief settles, after the worst days, after the tears and the silence and the lying still. A moment where something inside you whispers, "Okay, what now?" And that is when a different kind of paralysis begins. Not the paralysis of pain, the paralysis of possibility. Suddenly, there are too many directions and not enough energy to choose between them. You think about everything you need to do, and everything feels equally impossible. Find a new job. Find a new place. Build new habits. Rebuild trust in yourself. Reconnect with people. Start again. The list is so long it becomes a wall. And you sit down in front of that wall, and you do nothing. Not because you are lazy, not because you do not care, but because your brain is overwhelmed, and an overwhelmed brain does one thing very reliably. It stops. This is called the freeze response, and it is one of the most misunderstood experiences in rebuilding a life. People see someone frozen and think they are not trying hard enough, but the person who is frozen is not resting. They are stuck. There is a difference. So how do you break a freeze? Not with a plan, not with a list, not with someone telling you to think positive and get your life together. You break a freeze with one thing, the smallest possible action you can take right now. Open the window. Drink a glass of water. Stand up and walk to the kitchen. Send one message to one person. Step outside for 5 minutes. Not to exercise, not to be productive, just to feel the air on your face. These actions do not solve anything. They do not change your situation. They do not bring back what you lost or fix what is broken. But they do something far more important. They send a signal to your brain. A signal that says, we can still move. We can still choose. We are not completely powerless. And that signal, small as it is, begins to crack the freeze. The brain does not need a reason to move. It needs a movement to find a reason. Daniel remembers the morning he opened the window. It was day 4 in the small room. He had not planned to open it. He was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and his arm just reached out, almost without thinking, and pushed the handle down. The window swung open. Cool morning air came in. Somewhere outside, a bird was making noise. He lay there for a long time just listening to the bird. He could not tell you what kind of bird it was. He could not tell you what he was thinking. But something in him shifted. Something very small, but very real. The next morning, he opened the window again. On purpose this time. Day 6, he walked to the end of the street and back. Day 8, he bought groceries instead of ordering delivery. Day 10, he answered his sister's call. None of these things fixed his life, but each one proved something to him, that he was still a person who could act, that the freeze was not permanent, that movement, even tiny movement, created more movement. Viktor Frankl understood this at a level most of us will never have to reach. In the concentration camps, he had nothing. No freedom of movement, no control over his body, his food, his survival. Everything external had been taken. And yet he made one discovery that kept him alive in ways that went beyond the physical. He discovered that no one could take away his choice of how to respond to what was happening. That in the space between a terrible event and his reaction to it, there was a tiny gap. And in that gap lived his freedom. He could choose his attitude. He could choose where to direct his attention. He could choose to find meaning even in suffering. That is the smallest action of all, and it changed everything. You do not need to have Frankl's circumstances to understand his lesson. You just need to find your own tiny gap, your own small choice, your own window to open. Because starting over does not begin with a grand decision. It does not begin with a perfect plan or a sudden burst of motivation. It begins with one movement. One small proof that you are still here, still capable, still choosing. The freeze breaks, one action at a time, and once it breaks even a little, the next action becomes possible, and then the next. Not because life suddenly got easier, but because you remembered something essential about yourself. You can move. Lesson 4. Build the floor, not the ceiling. Here is something well-meaning people say to someone rebuilding their life. Dream big, think positive, set your goals high, visualize the life you want. Believe, and you will achieve. And maybe one day that advice will be exactly right for you. But not yet. When you are standing at 0, when the ground beneath you is still shaking, asking someone to dream big is like asking a person with a broken foundation to decorate the top floor. It does not matter how beautiful the decoration is. If the foundation is not there, everything falls. What you need first is not a ceiling. What you need is a floor. A floor is different from a dream. A floor is the minimum stable ground you need to function as a human being. A safe place to sleep. Enough food. One person you can call when things get hard. A small source of income, even if it is far below what you once earned. Basic physical health. A daily structure, even a loose one, that gives your hours some shape. These are not exciting things. Nobody makes a motivational video about getting enough sleep and paying a small bill on time. Nobody goes viral for choosing a humble job that keeps the lights on. But these small, unglamorous acts of stability are the most important work you can do right now. Because without a floor, every step forward becomes a fall backward. Without a floor, your energy goes entirely to surviving with nothing left for growing. The floor is what makes everything else possible. Daniel's friends expected him to come back strong, to announce a new plan, a new direction, a reinvention. They were waiting for the version of Daniel who showed up with ambition and momentum. That was the Daniel they knew. But Daniel surprised them. 6 weeks after moving into the small room, he took a job coordinating deliveries for a local company. It paid a third of his old salary. He drove a small van. He wore a uniform. One old colleague saw him at a traffic light and looked away quickly, embarrassed for him. Daniel noticed, and he felt something he did not expect. Not shame, quiet certainty. Because he understood something his colleague did not. He was not going backwards. He was building a floor. The van, the uniform, the modest pay, these were not the destination. They were the foundation. They gave him structure. They gave him routine. They gave him the ability to pay rent without panic, to sleep without the weight of financial fear pressing down on his chest every night. For the first time in months, he woke up knowing what the day would look like. That alone was worth more than he could explain. There is no shame in building small. Every tall building in the world started at ground level. Every strong tree began as a seed, underground, invisible, doing quiet work before anything appeared above the surface. The mistake most people make when rebuilding is trying to skip the floor entirely. They want to jump from zero directly to the life they imagine. And when that jump fails, as it almost always does, they feel worse than before. More broken. More hopeless. But the people who rebuild successfully, the ones who look back years later and say, "I actually made it," they almost never started with the grand vision. They started with the next small step. The practical thing, the humble thing, the thing that built just enough stability to take one more step the following week. Dream big, yes, but not today. Today, find the floor. Ask yourself honestly, what is the most basic, stable ground I can create for myself right now? Not in 5 years, not in the ideal version of this story. Right now this week, what would make my daily life just a little more solid? Maybe it is one phone call to someone who can help. Maybe it is applying for one job, any job that pays something. Maybe it is creating a simple morning routine that gives the first hour of your day a shape. Maybe it is just deciding to eat one proper meal today. These are floors. They are not glamorous, but they are real. And real is what rebuilding is made of. The ceiling can wait. The ceiling will come. When the floor is solid, when you can stand without shaking, the ceiling becomes possible in a way it never was before. Build the floor first. Everything else follows from there. Lesson 5. Let the old story go. There is a conversation that happens inside the minds of people rebuilding their lives. It runs quietly in the background, like a song you did not choose but cannot stop hearing. It sounds like this. If I had made different choices, none of this would have happened. If I had stayed. If I had left sooner. If I had worked harder or worked less. If I had listened to the warning signs. If I had been braver or more careful or less trusting or more open. If only. If only. If only. You know this conversation. Maybe you are having it right now. It feels like thinking. It feels like learning from the past, processing what went wrong, trying to understand so you can do better. And sometimes, for a short time, it is. Reflection has real value. Looking honestly at your past choices. Understanding your patterns. Recognizing where you contributed to your own pain. That is important work. But there is a line. A line between reflecting on the past and living inside it. And many people who are rebuilding their lives have crossed that line without noticing. When the same thoughts play on repeat for weeks, for months, they are no longer teaching you anything. They are just keeping you inside the ruins of something that no longer exists. Think of it this way. Imagine a house that burned down. The fire is over. The house is gone. But every morning you walk back to the site, sit down in the ashes, and spend hours trying to understand exactly how the fire started. Which wire? Which moment? Whose fault? The ashes do not change. The house does not come back. But you keep sitting there, day after day, covered in gray dust, while a perfectly buildable piece of land waits just a few steps away. That is what the old story does. It keeps you sitting in the ashes. Letting go of the old story does not mean pretending the fire never happened. It does not mean the pain was not real, or that the loss did not matter, or that the people involved were not responsible for what they did. All of that can be true and still not worth living inside. Letting go means making a choice, a quiet, deliberate choice. I see what happened. I understand it as well as I am able to, and I am choosing not to make it the place where I live. One evening, about 2 months into his new life in the small room, Daniel sat down with a piece of paper and a pen. He wrote down everything he had lost. The marriage, the house, the role, the future he had imagined, the Sunday mornings that used to feel safe, the sound of his daughter's voice from the next room. He wrote until there was nothing left to write. Then he read it back slowly, every line. And then he folded the paper, carefully, once, twice, 3 times. He did not burn it. He did not tear it. He opened the drawer of the small bedside table and placed the folded paper inside. And he said quietly, to no one in particular, "I see you. I remember you. But I am not going back." He closed the drawer. That was not the end of his grief. The paper was still there. He knew it. But something changed in that moment. He had acknowledged the loss fully, completely, without minimizing it. And then he had chosen consciously to step away from it. Not forever, just for today, and then tomorrow, and then the day after that. Here is something that surprises people about forgiveness. It is not primarily about the other person. When you forgive someone who hurt you, when you release the story of what they did and how it broke things, you are not doing it for them. You are doing it for yourself. Because carrying that story is heavy. It takes energy you need for other things. It keeps part of your attention permanently locked in a moment that is already over. Every hour you spend replaying the old story is an hour not spent building the new one. Releasing the old story is not weakness. It is one of the most powerful decisions a person can make. You are allowed to grieve what you lost. You are allowed to feel angry about what was unfair. You are allowed to take whatever time you need to process. But at some point, and only you will know when that point arrives, you will need to fold the paper, place it in the drawer, and walk toward the empty land that is waiting for you. Living in the ruins keeps you in the past. Leaving them behind is how you begin. You are not starting over. You are starting differently. And you cannot start differently while you are still standing in what already ended. Lesson 6. You are not starting over. You are starting differently. We have come a long way together in this lesson. We started in a small, quiet room with a man named Daniel, 42 years old, one bag on the floor, a phone with no new messages, a life that had come apart at every seam at once. We talked about grief, about letting the weight of loss land fully instead of running from it. We talked about identity, about who you are when the roles and labels are stripped away and what remains when they are gone. We talked about the freeze and how one small action, opening a window, answering a call, walking to the end of a street, can crack it open. We talked about building a floor before a ceiling, about choosing stability over performance, and we talked about the old story, about folding it carefully and placing it in a drawer. Not forgetting, but choosing not to live inside it anymore. 6 lessons, 6 honest truths for anyone standing at zero. And now, the last one. Here is what most people believe about starting over. They believe it means going back to the beginning, erasing everything, becoming someone new from scratch, as if the previous chapters never happened. They imagine it like a blank page, clean, empty, unmarked. But that is not what zero actually is. Zero is not a blank page. Zero is a page that has been written on, crossed out, torn a little at the edges, stained with coffee and tears and time. It carries marks. It carries history. It carries the weight of everything you have already lived. And that is not a disadvantage. That is the most valuable thing you own. Because the person who stands at zero today is not the same person who stood at the beginning years ago, before all of this. That earlier version of you had energy, maybe, had optimism, had a certain kind of lightness that comes from not yet knowing how hard things can get. But you have something that person did not. You have survived something. You have felt real loss, and you are still here. You have sat in the silence and not disappeared. You have opened windows on days when everything in you wanted to stay still. You have folded old stories and chosen imperfectly and painfully to walk towards something new. That is not nothing. That is everything. J.K. Rowling did not return to zero and start fresh. She returned to zero and discovered what had always been real. Viktor Frankl did not come out of the camps as a new man. He came out as a more completely realized version of the man who had always been there underneath the fear and the loss and the unimaginable suffering. They did not start over. They started differently, with more, with deeper roots, with a kind of clarity that only comes from having lost things and survived the losing. The person who rebuilds is not the same person who fell. They are someone the fall could not break. And that person, the one standing in the wreckage, the one who has grieved and stripped down and moved and built a floor and let the old story rest, that person is not starting from nothing. That person is starting from experience, from honesty, from a self that has been tested and is still standing. So if you are at zero today, hear this. You are not behind. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not too old, too tired, too far gone. You are not starting over. You are starting differently, with everything you have already learned written into your bones, with a clearer sense of what actually matters, with a strength that was not there before because it could not have been. It had to be earned, and it was, by you. In the silence, in the small rooms, in the difficult mornings, in every moment you chose to keep going when stopping felt easier. That is not starting over. That is something far more powerful. What is one thing you lost that you are still carrying? Tell me in the comments, because you are not alone in this. And sometimes the most important step forward begins with knowing that. 6 months after that first quiet morning in the small rented room, Daniel is still not where he wants to be. His life is not perfect. Some nights are still hard. Some mornings he opens the drawer and looks at the folded paper. But he does not unfold it. He just looks. And then he closes the drawer and makes coffee. He has a floor now. A small, solid, real floor. And from there, for the first time in a long time, he can see a ceiling worth building toward. That is what starting differently looks like. Not perfect, not fast, just real and forward and yours. 6 lessons for anyone standing at zero. Grief first, move second. Strip your identity down to the bone. Let the smallest action break the freeze. Build the floor before the ceiling. Let the old story go. And remember always that you are not starting over. You are starting differently. If this lesson moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment. And keep coming back, because there are more stories and lessons here made for English learners who want to grow inside and out. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.